Project Zomboid takes place on an incredibly large map situated in Knox Country, a partially fictional area based on the real-life US state of Kentucky. For years, this map has been added to, polished, and most recently in Build 42, we've seen a complete overhaul of a number of locations within the playable area. But have you ever wondered what the outbreak was like outside of Kentucky? Now, we've never really heard much about the rest of the world's reaction to the Knox event, if they were even affected at all, and if so, what their quarantine procedures looked like. Recently though, a full overhaul project has been quietly rising through the modding scene, and if you haven't heard of it yet, you're in for a real treat. We're taking Project Zomboid to France.
Well, ooh-la-dee-da, Mr. Frenchman.
Okay, so first things first, I should introduce the mods. We're going to take a more detailed look at everything within and show some gameplay throughout this video. But before that, you need to know what mods to download. Unsurprisingly, this modded overhaul of Project Zomboid is aptly named Project France. To make things easier for you, if you want to give this a try, I've included a link to the Creators Collection, including all 4 of the Project France mods down in the description of this video. This includes the primary map mod, the vehicles, items, and music that you'll need for the full experience. Just a quick heads up here that the music mod also requires SARS Common Library 2.0 and True Music, which you might already have if you've used mods like these before. Just subscribe to each of the mods on the Steam Workshop, select them in your main menu, and you'll be good to go. One last disclaimer here, and this is an important one. The Project France collection is currently only compatible with Build 41, but the creators have said they are already working on Build 42 and hope to release that in the future. Okay, so now that you know how to play Project France, let's take a look at what makes this overhaul so special, starting with the map itself. I had a couple of hours to sit down and explore this map just the other day on a live stream, but I also spent time afterwards in debug mode checking out various points of interest. And I think the thing that stuck out to me the most was just how detailed everything is. Don't get me wrong, the default map is fantastic, but Project France has a lot more in the way of decorative tiles that make it look as though the world has actually been lived in, from small tipped over plant pots to bicycles resting against walls and various ground clutter items. It makes everything feel a bit more immersive and does a really convincing job of setting the scene. There are a few different spawn locations for you to choose from, and to help tell you what you're in for, there's a population value attached to each one, making it easy to decide if you want a rural, quieter experience with less loot to find, or more plentiful loot runs with a higher number of Zeds to go with it. What I especially love in this map is the feel of being in the built-up areas. Having been to France quite a few times myself when I was a teenager, the townhouses stretching 3 or 4 floors with relatively cramped interiors feels very reminiscent of reality, and then in complete contrast, in the more rural areas, things are much more spacious, both in terms of distance between buildings and the space inside them. So let's talk about the technicalities of the map now. It's a total of 437 cells, which for context here is about the same size as the map expansion brought to the vanilla map with Build 42, which was about 430 cells. That means you've got a sizable area to play with, although it's important for me to note at this time, there's still a fair bit of open space that could be added to in the northwestern region of Project France and a smaller area in the southeastern region. I would imagine that over time, we're likely to see these currently empty segments of the map added to. In total, there are over 1,700 unique buildings on Project France, but what's particularly interesting to me is how they achieve the level of immersion that they have. The map was made using a combination of satellite imagery, photogrammetry, and actual original photographs, both current and historical. When you know a bit more about how the map was made, it's really no wonder they seem to have achieved such a high level of realism. Alright, so that's the map, but earlier in the video I talked about all the other stuff that Project France brings to the table that a regular modded map just doesn't tend to do. This map takes you to an entirely different part of the world, and as such there is a very clear difference in culture. So the creators of Project France brought in a host of item packs to add to the experience. This includes various clothing, food items, weapons, vehicles, and more, which we'll all be taking a look at individually. The weapons in the Project France pack are all firearms, and they've not just added their own, but also replaced all of the existing firearms with some that make a bit more sense for the French setting. Overall, there are over 25 weapons in the item pack, and that includes the standard mix of shotguns, pistols, and rifles, but also the addition of some other older bolt-action rifles, and even a couple of special type weapons like the FR-F2 sniper rifle and the FN Mini-Me with a 200-round box magazine. For me though, what stood out the most was the addition of a couple of submachine guns, allowing the use of a one-handed automatic weapon, which can be a great option if you're carrying around a duffel bag in your offhand, for example. Some of the weapons have unique animations attached to them as well. I was recording a bit of footage of the FAMAS in use and noticed my character was holding the rifle slightly differently to how they usually would, which is just honestly a really nice touch. This also goes for weapons like the Mini-Me, which has a unique reloading animation as well, with a much longer reloading time on account of, well, being a light machine gun with a box magazine. Okay, so that's the firearms, but one of the absolute cornerstones of any Project Zomboid playthrough is vehicles. With Project France comes its own vehicle replacement mod, and I've got to praise them for this one. It's incredibly high quality, reminiscent of the very popular creations from the likes of KI5 on the Steam Workshop. Every single vehicle in this mod pack is entirely different to what you'd find in the vanilla game on account of them being from European manufacturers for the most part. And that makes for a real change of scenery, particularly for those of you playing Project Zomboid from the US, who'd I'd assume may even be personally familiar with the vehicles in the vanilla game. These cars are entirely different, and there's some really quirky designs in there, all of which are actual European cars from the time period. They handle pretty much as you'd expect them to. There is a variety of vehicle types, like some with more storage and others that are quicker or quieter. There's even a couple of race cars available that are quite rare to find, but have some really impressive design elements to them and are obviously very speedy. One of the nice little extras you'll find when interacting with these vehicles though is that all of the components are fully animated and the interiors are fully modeled, meaning you'll get a look at the engine when you pop the hood and see parts of the upholstery when opening a door. Again, it's just really high quality with a lot of attention to detail, and that makes a difference. The attention to detail doesn't stop with the vehicles though. Several items you'd expect to find in day-to-day life in France have been added to the distribution tables, and while they aren't exactly as big ticket as vehicles or firearms, they do make a difference. Let's say you're digging through some kitchen cabinets in search of food, you're not just going to find mac and cheese or a bag of chips like you would in Kentucky. You'll also find several French dishes like andouille and tartiflette. Apologies if I didn't pronounce one of those correctly, but you get the idea. There seems to be a particular focus on items that would be jarred and preserved, which is a great benefit to us as players because of course these items last for much longer without the use of refrigeration. So not only do these items help to increase the believability of the environment around you, but they also serve a functional purpose in terms of survival. Lastly, it's worth me making a mention for the variety of clothing items in the Project France collection. Not only does it feature some casual clothing that you'd expect to see in day-to-day life, like say football shirts or polos, but also a range of government issue clothing for the associated services. The military looks entirely different, as does law enforcement, firefighters, and ambulance services. Oh, and before I forget, I did mention during the intro that there's a music component to this mod collection, and while I'd love to show that off for you, unfortunately, it is not copyright-free music, and that causes issues with YouTube, but it's all French-themed, much of it is from the time period, and there are both cassettes and vinyl players you can find in-game to play them. Okay, so that just about concludes our detailed look at the Project France mod pack. Now, I know the creators are keen for feedback and are eagerly pushing forward towards getting things compatible for Build 42. So if you've had the chance to play the map for yourself and have some thoughts on how it could be improved or some ideas on what you'd like to see included, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. If you'd like to see gameplay of Project France in action and my first look at the map itself, I've uploaded this to my second channel, MrAtomicDuck VODs. There will be a link in the description if you want to see how it gameplays in practice. Finally, a very special thank you to all of my Patreon supporters for backing the channel and joining our whitelisted multiplayer server for £3 a month, which is actually going to be running Project France in July. So if you're looking for a multiplayer experience on this map, there is a link in the description to that too. Thanks folks, and I will see you all in the next one.